Okay, here I am in Maya LT 2020, and I have Clara's really cool robot open. I just wanted to share it with you guys. As you can see, she's built this very cool robot with this cool tail. Let me turn off the lights in my scene just for a minute so we can see it without shadows. And also, Clara submitted this at 4 a.m. She's a night worker, apparently. I like that. Okay, so here is this robot. And you can see that Clara set up a kind of a ground plane, and she built 3 walls and included a light for her robot, apparently intending to render it. So when I opened up this file the first time, these textures that you see in here and on the tires were missing. The way I got them all back, just so you know, was by using the projects. This is why it's critical that we make projects. So to get all those textures back, I went to File, Set Project, and I have these stored in the Submissions Robots folder, and inside of that folder is the project folder that Clara sent me. So all I have to do is select that to link to it, and you can see, before I do that, you can see that all of her textures and stuff are here in source images exactly where they're supposed to be. So I just selected that and clicked on Open, and that connected me back to her project so Maya knows what's going on. And then the textures became available and were placed on the objects as they should be. Okay. I don't need to spend too much time with Clara, as I'm going to switch over to another file to show you how to set up the lighting and walls and things like that. I have some other solutions, and that will give me an opportunity to show you a different tool as well. One thing I do want to look at here, though, that's not related to rendering, but it's critical. I talked a bit in the last video about history, and you can see in Clara's file there are all of these object names, and when you open them up to see what's inside of them, I'm in the outliner right now, you can see that there's nothing in them except a transform, what I call a transform node, meaning that she made a torus and she moved it. And then she did something and to change the nature of the polygon, and we are left with all of these empty transformation nodes. These are pieces of history. What she did, I'm pretty sure, because of the tutorial, the rocket tutorial that we did. So I'm pretty sure that what she did here was, because if we look all the way at the bottom here, there is P torus 13, and when I select that, the entire robot is selected. So I think she must have done the Boolean combine as she was going, or the Boolean union as she was going down through and building the model, as you did in the rocket model, which is fine. Well, that works. Don't all have to do that, but that does work. So we need to get rid of all this stuff. And also, if you look over here, I have, again, torus 13 selected. And if you look over here, see all of these tabs up here? So these tabs are history. They're not necessary anymore. We don't need them. These are moves that she made. It's just like when Photoshop remembers your history. But it makes it really complicated to find stuff, right? Because there's so many of them. Another way to look at these, to see the extent of this, is if we go to the channel box. And then here under inputs, you can see all of the things that Clara did as she was building this shape. There's polyunite right there at the top. Okay. So we need to get rid of all that history so that this file will become a little bit easier to manage. So I'm going to go up again to, with the torus 13 selected, I'm going to go up again to Edit, Delete All by Type History. And you can see that most, and I'm not sure why LT doesn't delete them all, but most of those transformation nodes are gone. I'm going to also just select and delete these and hope nothing bad happens. Probably they were connected to these cubes down here. So now this scene is much cleaner. Now we have our 4 lights. We have our robot. We have a directional light. And then we have 4 walls. And, 3 walls and a floor. Right? Now it would make sense, and I'd like you to do this, now it would make sense just to come in here and name things. So again, I'm just going to click on the robot, and I don't know what it's called. I think it's a cat, isn't it? Feline bot. Okay, and then we have floor plane. And we have back wall, left wall, and I think right wall. Okay, and then we have a turtle bake layer, which we don't need to think about. Okay, so there it is. So if I turn back on my lighting up here, so I turn my light on, a single light, and I turn on cast shadows, and I can turn on ambient space occlusion. You probably wonder what that is, and that would be a very good question. Let's zoom ourselves in a little bit here. So now watch in these corners here. When we turn on ambient occlusion, it tries to simulate the places that are and are not receiving ambient light. Ambient light is when light kind of bounces off of surfaces, and maybe things that are not directly in the light path receive some light. So it's an ambient occlusion piece. The other thing I'd like to look at here real quick is the anti-aliasing. If we look along the edges of some of these shapes, you can see there's some jagged stuff going on. And if we click on that, you can see the edges become much smoother. I don't think zooming in, well, it might. Let's see. So let me turn that off and zoom in, and you can see, yeah, you can see the pixelization along the edges. And if we turn that back on, you can see that there's a lot less. You can actually see the blending along the edges that we've talked about in Photoshop and digital imaging. That's anti-aliasing. So what Maya has become good at because of processing speed is rendering to the screen, these hardware renders. You also might want to know what this is up here. These are all these statistics that are telling me how many vertices, edges, polygons, triangles, and UVs are in my scene. This is something that I've just gotten in the habit of looking at, and you can turn that on and off under Display, Heads-Up Display. And here there are all kinds of statistics that you can turn on, many of which are related directly to animation. But I have turned poly count on along with view axis, and I also get messages as things are happening, camera names. This tells me if the caps lock is on, which can screw things up royally if you don't know it, if you don't know it's on. So that's under Display, Heads-Up Display. Okay. Okay, so let's render this thing. I mean, what we could do is I could turn off this heads-up display right here, and I could do a screen capture and save it, and that would be a hardware rendering. But let's try doing a software rendering. So different versions of Maya use different renderers. And again, the renderer is the algorithms that turn the math and the geometry into pixels so that we can have an image. And it is, you can make it any resolution you want. Again, because it's like Illustrator, it's scalable, it's math. So we can render print-sized renderings, or we can render screen-based renderings. Now what I've discovered about LT is that LT doesn't really care about print-sized renderings because LT is basically for game design. So it only cares about rendering to the screen. So there are a lot of rendering pieces that are missing from LT. I did not realize the extent to which how many are missing. All the modeling is there. That's great. But any of this rendering stuff is not there. There are advantages because you can do certain kinds of rendering activities called baking the lighting and things like that. We could come back to that. You can do things like that in LT a little more easily than the straight-up version of Maya, but you can't do things like change the size of your rendering or change the proportions of your rendering. There is no Maya software render, which has been standard in Maya for years. So there's some limitations. But at any rate, we can get a rendering. So one of the first things I like to do before I make a rendering is go up to View here in this perspective view and choose Camera Settings, Resolution Gate. Okay, so what that is, you can see now there is a rectangle around in the scene. This is the part that will render inside the rectangle. The part outside the rectangle will not render. So that gives you a way to compose and to frame your scenes. So if I go back up here again, I'll show you where that was. It's under View, Camera Settings, Resolution Gate. So here we have a few things. We are using one of our cameras. Yeah. No gate means there isn't one. Film gate is going to be, in this particular version of Maya, going to be the same as resolution gate. And you can also do something called a gate mask. And by the way, because I notice how I have to keep going back up to this menu and making different changes and stuff, there's a little these little dotted lines right here that are at the top of any pull-down menu. If you click on them, it breaks the menu out, so you can kind of keep it open. So I don't have to go up and be irritated about constantly doing the same thing. I wanted to show you the gate mask, which is right here. So the gate mask obviously puts a sort of transparent layer around the piece that's framed, so we know so it becomes very obvious that that's the part that's not going to render, this is the part that is going to render. Okay? Okay, so we're going now to just simply go to the Shading tab. So I was here at the beginning, and if I go over to the Shading tab, then these are render buttons. These will render for us an image. So if I click on this one, then it's creating a turtle render. So turtle is the renderer that's being used here. All right, and so you can see that we have cast shadows. There's some reflections going on in here. The textures are rendering. Looks pretty good. Okay, just wanted to show you a couple things about this rendering here. One thing that is very handy is that we can temporarily save this image file to this render view by clicking right here, and that saves this file temporarily in the computer's memory. So now if I go back up here, say I change my point of view, well, let's say I get rid of these things just for a moment. That'll help me show you something else. I get rid of those things. Maybe I get rid of this for now too. Actually, let me bring all those back. I'm going to do that in a different way. So I'm going to select all these, Shift, and select them all. And rather than deleting them, I'm just going to simply hide them for the moment. So if I go up to Display, Hide, and Hide Selection. So rather than deleting them, which might be a little too dramatic, I can just hide them. Okay, so now let me zoom back into my scene here and pan down a little bit. Try to get Feline Bot here fully in the picture. There we go. So now I'm going to do a rendering without the objects. So remember I said that I used this little button here to temporarily save this image file. So I'm going to click here and do another rendering. Point of view. So you can see we really do need those walls, and I can see why Clara put them in, but there's something I want to show you here. So now if we pull this across, you can see we have saved both renderings, so we can compare them. Okay? And this can come in really handy if you're making subtle tweaks to the lighting, things like that. And I'll show you another little trick with that here in 1 second. So I'm going to also save this one. And I wanted to show you under display here within this render window, you can see we have channels that we can display. And something that's interesting is alpha channel. So because I hid the geometry that was behind Feline Bot, that area renders as black, which if saved in the right file format is transparency. So you can render alpha channels in Maya, and then we could bring this, if we brought this image, let's say, let's come back on all the channels, if we brought this image, let's say, into After Effects or Premiere or any kind of video editing program, or put it on a website, whatever, that black would be transparent, and we could have something behind it that would show. So we could basically key this robot into another scene, which could come in very handy if you're making an animation, let's say. So let's say we animate this robot doing something and we key out the background, and then we can place it into a different context. Or if you're working in a team and someone else on the team is building the background, you know, building a city or whatever, then you guys can work separately, but this can be keyed into their work. You get the picture. Okay, so there's that. Another thing I wanted to show you here, let me go back to here, and let me choose my light over here, directional light, and grab the attribute editor. And I'm going to just change the color of the light just to show you something. So I'm going to make the light yellow. Okay, and then I'm going to go back here. And let's say I don't want to, why is that small? Oh well, whatever. Let's say I don't want to render this whole thing again. Let's say it takes a long time. I want to concentrate on one particular area to see how it's doing. I can render selectively. This button right here allows you to render just a region. So I can click and drag a box like that, and then click on Render Region. And it will only render the area in that region. So you can kind of go along and check things out. And this, as I said, is especially handy if your rendering takes a while to do, and you don't want to wait around for it. Okay, so that's called Render Region. And again, we can save this version down by clicking there, and now we have 1, 2, 3. So we have all the versions in here. Now, if I closed Maya, these renderings would be gone. Okay? So let's say I want to save one of these. So I'm going to go back to the first one. Let's say I want to save this. So if I go to File, can't seem to really save it there. Okay, cool. See? Nice. Okay. Beautiful. So what I will do is, we have the red. Okay. Okay, I figured it out. This is a roundabout way to do this, but it works. So, okay. So what we're going to do is, so in Maya you can make something called a Playblast. And if you look under Windows, you'll see Playblast. And a Playblast is like a test animation. That's generally what it's used for. So it essentially records what's on the screen into a movie file. So if you were building an animation, then you'd have a timeline down here, and you'd have a bunch of keyframes, and you'd have things moving around, and you would say Playblast, and it would make a really crude, almost. Well, I mean, it would make it as good as you wanted it to be, actually. They can be pretty good these days. But it would basically take what's on the screen and turn it into an animation, and you set a frame rate and all that sort of stuff. So what I can do, what I figured out, I thought, okay, well, let's use a Playblast, and we'll just render one frame. Let's see what that looks like. So I found that that works. So I found some options in there. So if we go up to Window, Playblast, actually, before I do that, I think I'm going to bring back the walls and stuff, and or at least some of them. So I'm going to go to back up to Display. If you remember, we did Display Hide Selection before, so now we're going to do Display Show Last Hidden. Very handy, right? Okay, and I'm going to take this wall and I'm going to hide it. And the keyboard sequence for hide selection is Control H. Okay, so it's gone. There we go. Okay, so then I think I might take these two walls and just scale them both up. There we go. Okay, cool. So now let's go back up to Windows, Playblast, and then this little box over here. You have probably encountered this before. This is the options box. So if you don't click on the options box, then whatever you click on here will just do whatever it was told to do the last time. But we want to make some changes here, I'm sure. So I'm going to click on this little box. And here are the, let me set this back to its defaults. Anytime you want to set these options back to their defaults, there's a reset right here. So this is what it looks like the first time you open it up. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to time range. Let me make this bigger for you. So I'm going to go to time range and choose start end. That's like how many frames do you want to render if you had an animation. I only want one. So I'm going to set that to 1. View and show ornaments. Now this is a hardware rendering, and the ornaments are like this manipulator right here, the scale tool. That is an ornament. The XYZ axis, that is an ornament. The grid, that is an ornament. I don't want those in here, so I'm going to turn those off. I'm also going to turn off view because that is the name of the view at the bottom of your screen. I don't want to see that. Okay. All right. So then I'm going to go Format, and this says AV Foundation. I'm going to choose Image. Encoding. I'm going to. There's a lot of stuff in here. I'm going to just choose PNG. And quality is not relevant because it's not a JPEG or a compressed one. Display size, custom. Okay, see, now we can make some changes in the size. So we're going to go scale 101, and let's set this to 1920. Let's make a big one. Let's see what happens. I'm going to make it 3840 by 2560. I'm doing a little math in my head here. And then frame padding is set to 0. Frame padding, what that means is when you're rendering an animation, you sometimes render a sequence of frames, not a movie file, but 30 frames a second, a billion frames. And frame padding is the way the frames are numbered. So frame padding of 1 would be, the files will be numbered 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4. Frame padding of 4 would mean the files will be numbered 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 2. So that frame padding can accommodate large numbers of files. So, but we don't, well, let's go with 1. We'll see. Okay, and then remove temporary files, save to file, and then where do you want to save it? So we're going to go browse here. We're going to put it in the images folder within Clara's project. Not the source images, but the images. Source images are images you use. Images are images you make. So then we're going to go down here and choose the PNG format. Okay, and let me back out. So we're putting it there, and then we're going to call it feline bot 2. And we'll see what the frame padding does with that, and save. Okay, okay, cool. So now all we got to do is say apply. And computer's slowing down. Oh yeah, there we go. If you look down at the corner of my screen, the lower right corner, it said calculating, and now it says results, and the file has been saved. This is why I like to keep this little thing open. If you look down here, you can see there are the results. Okay, okay. So let's see what we got. So I will minimize. Whoa. Yeah, don't look at that desktop. I will minimize all the screen grabs I've been doing. Well, that's not all it is, but anyway, here we go. Submissions, robots, Clara, images, and here are the images. I rendered this one earlier, and I just rendered this one now. So if we select this one, we can see there it is. And it's the size I asked for. It did give us the, we have to crop this. Probably not. Yeah, we have to crop both of these. But let's open them up real quick. All right, and there they are. So that is the rendering with the alpha channel, the first one I did, which when I took out all the backgrounds, this is the one that I just did. Now you can see it does render the entire frame. So you could either crop this in Photoshop or GIMP or something, or you could just turn off that render gate, that camera render gate, so that you wouldn't have the framing there. But we did get a rendered image out. The shadows look kind of crummy. It is a hardware rendering. So there it is. Couple options. I suggest that we switch to Maya straight up, but you know, that's up to you. I think we should. Okay, thanks. Talk to you soon.